All right. Hello, everybody. Thank you for showing up. See a lot of you guys in the attendee list that I recognize, so thank you for being here. I know we've had conversations over the phone or via email, but I also see a lot of you guys that I'm not familiar with, so thanks as well for being here. I think you guys are going to learn a lot. As you can see, this webinar has a lot to do with tracking explanted medical device credits and why it's not always a good idea to leave that in the sales rep's hands. We do have three great speakers today, as well as myself. My name is Joe Heminger. I'm a business development rep here at SpendMend. But kicking things off, if you guys have joined any of our webinars in the past, you might recognize Al and Dennis. But Al is the Chief Sales Officer here at SpendMend. He has over 30 years experience in clinical social work, nursing, and hospital administration, including holding positions as the Director of Emergency Services of a Level 1 trauma center, a Director of Surgical Services of a 30-suite OR, and CNO over 3 hospitals and 2 long-term care facilities in a 22-hospital system. It's also worth mentioning that Al developed track cord tissue and implanting. So Al, thanks for being here. It's always a pleasure. And then we also have another another member of the SpendMend team, Dennis Bell. Dennis is the manager here at SpendMend for our medical device audit and compliance team. Dennis has over 30 years experience in the auditing field. So just like Al, tons of experience. It's also worth mentioning that in 2021, just last year, Dennis was actually recognized as one of the nation's top 50 consultants serving the healthcare space. So it's a pretty big deal. Dennis, thanks for being here today. And then last but not least, our guest speaker, Casey Ann Posh. Casey Ann is from Medtronic. She is a warranty manager for their post-market quality group. She has been with Medtronic for the past 25 years. She has a green belt in Lean Sigma process improvement and is proud to help support the compliance efforts of Medtronic's customers through direct customer support, as well as utilizing her project management skills to improve functions that support customers. So thank you guys for being here. We really appreciate it.
Glad to be here, Joe.
And then just a little background on SpendMend in case you guys aren't familiar. We like to say that we deliver visibility, insight, containment, and optimization in the cost cycle to help hospitals control costs, reduce risk, and ultimately fund patient care. Then to the top right of this screen, you can kind of see just SpendMend by the numbers, 98% retention rate, almost 30 years serving the healthcare market. More than 60% of the top 50 IDNs choose us, and we have 2,500 individual hospitals under review. At the bottom part of the slide, you can see all the solutions that we offer, whether it be recovery to IT optimization. But what we're talking about today falls under the umbrella of medical device explant warranty tracking. So that's just a little background on SpendMend. And then real quick, before I pass things on to Al to take over, I just want to let you guys know on the right side of the screen, we have a questions box. So please don't be shy. If you guys have any questions, fire them away. We booked some time at the end of this webinar to answer those. So appreciate it. And these slides will also be available after the webinar. We'll send you guys a recording with the slides. So thank you everyone for being here. Without further ado, I'm going to pass it on to Al.
Thanks, Joe. So today's topic is about medical device warranty credits. So these medical devices that we put in patients sometimes fail sooner than expected, whether it's a mechanical issue, a battery issue, or possibly even being recalled. And so CMS expects us to have a process on the hospital side, and I apologize. I always say we as if I'm still in the hospital. Too many years. I realize I'm on the dark side now, and I'm a vendor. But we need a process for this because typically, as you can see here, the government is the largest purchaser of these devices, so they paid for the original procedure. Then they pay for the explant and the new device to put in. And a lot of times those devices have warranties. And so they need to go back to the manufacturers to be evaluated to see if that money is indeed, if there is warranty money available. And so those credits are issued. I know when I was on the hospital side, we relied on the vendor reps to do this. And so kind of the point of today's call is one, just to talk about the legal and financial responsibilities of that. And two, to have Medtronic with us to talk about just how they can help. So, you know, the answer is no, you can't rely on the reps 100% to do this, but yes, they're very helpful, and Medtronic has a lot of great tools that makes this process easier. Because at the end of the day, if you don't do this correctly, there's some fines that we'll get into here in a minute. Also, there's lots of devices that have warranties. So as you look at your hospital and your program, you've got to look at all of the different procedure areas and make sure that you have a process and a policy across all of those. We've got our first poll here, so I'll turn it back to you, Joe, to throw a poll up for all of you to answer.
Yeah, so I hope you guys can all see that. But we're just curious, who owns the warranty credit process at your facility? So we're going to give you guys a little bit of time to answer that. We know at every hospital it seems like it's different. So just curious to see how that falls at your guys' hospitals.
And I can't see the results, Joe, so I'll rely on you to tell us when we can move forward and what the results are.
Yeah, of course. Looks like we're still getting some votes in. I'll let it run for just a couple more seconds and then I'll close it.
And this is one of the hardest parts of this because it touches so many different departments. Clinical on the front end to be able to replace the device and take care of it. Then supply chain to return that device. Then of course the vendor has a piece in this process. And then lastly, the financial departments of the hospital, AP taking the credit, and then the rev cycle are the people that actually update that credit with the UB04. So Joe, what is our results?
Yeah, so it looks like finance and rev cycle was the leading for our voters, with 50% choosing that, while 36% said that supply chain handles this, with 7% in clinical and 7% having compliance handle this.
Okay, well, this is definitely a compliance issue, overarching wise. And so what I want to do is just go over a couple of the expectations and highlight some of the things that have changed in the last couple of years. First and foremost, under the prudent buyer standard, you are supposed to, when these devices fail or the battery depletes early, send them back to the manufacturers. Now, one of the interesting changes that has happened is that CMS is now holding hospitals responsible for this, whether or not they send back that device or not. So failure to send back a device and not get a credit does not mean that you may not owe money back to CMS. What CMS has said that if you send back this device and you do get a credit, if that credit is 50% or greater, then you have to return the money. If it's 49% or less, the hospital actually gets to keep that warranty credit. And it's important to have a solid procedure in place because most of these devices are going to fall below that 49% threshold. So if you are not returning them and just putting these devices in the biohazardous bin, you're literally throwing cash in the trash. The other thing that has greatly changed in the last 2 years is the cost of non-compliance. It used to be if you didn't do this correctly, it was a $5,000 fine, and then you would return any credits that you received. Now, and I think partially because they've done 7 of these reviews, and the hospital side, we haven't done the great job of really getting stuff in place. They've changed to $11,000 per instance up to almost 23. And then when you do have to return those credits, you have to return 3 times the amount of whatever the credit is you received. Now, the legal and financial responsibility of this is not on the original implanting hospital. It is on the explanting hospital. Now, often the implanting hospital and the explanting hospital are the same thing, but a lot of these devices are in the elderly population. And so if they're live in the Northeast during the summers and get one of these devices placed and then spend their winter months down in Florida or Arizona, it may not be that same hospital that is doing both of these parts of the procedures. So know that the legal and financial responsibility is 100% with the explanting hospital. So all of these fines and penalties that we've talked about, including some of the more serious situations where you could become an excluded provider or even jail time because this falls under Medicare fraud, all rely on that explanting hospital. And so what we want to talk about today is what can the rep help us with? And the reality is, no, you can't rely on the rep 100% to do this, because you have this responsibility. Now, the manufacturers, and Casey Ann is going to get into this in a little bit, they do have responsibilities as far as FDA reporting and tracking and all of these devices. But as far as the CMS reimbursement of those overpayments, that is 100% on that explanting hospital. So some of the things that have gone on in the last 2 years with COVID and everything else is, for a time, they stopped doing any kind of on-site audits. About a year ago, they said, hey, we're going to start resuming these audits. They released a new report that I'm going to go over here in just a moment and give you a very high level. But what was interesting in January is Congress approved $50 million to increase the number of provider audits. So expect to see that. We've actually have a letter here. We've had probably 6 or 7 hospitals across our ecosystem get these letters in the last couple of months. So there's definitely been a huge increase. So when we look at that audit, and this is very similar findings to the 2016 audit of over 210 hospitals. This one was 911. And when they looked at these high-risk claims, 50% of the time, hospitals were not doing this correctly. Now, part of the reason that Congress gladly approved that $50 million addition to their budget, Medicare really believes, CMS believes, that this is a $30 billion issue, that we're not doing this correctly. So when you look at that audit report, they have some conclusions in the back. And one of the biggest ones is that hospitals that relied on the manufacturer reps to handle this, there were gaps that resulted. That was not consistent, and they saw a lot of issues. They really found across those 900 hospitals that a lot of them did not have adequate internal controls or procedures. At best, they had spreadsheets in different departments. And hospitals really need to pursue all available credits. When they get them, report them, and audit this process annually. When we
Hey, I'll not to interrupt, sorry, but we did have another poll question for the audience. We're just curious, guys, does the manufacturer rep handle explant returns for you? And we're going to take a little time and let you guys answer that.
And while we do have Medtronic on the phone today, know that we've talked to Boston Scientific and Abbott St. Jude and Biotronic, and all of them have very similar responsibilities for this. And so as you answer that, it'll be very interesting after I'm going to turn this over to Dennis here for a few minutes to go through what we've seen as our organization has done these mock audits for different hospitals. To hear just what the expectations are from the manufacturer side. So our results in, Joe, there we go.
Yeah, so it looks like the leading at 33% was no, the hospital does. 28% said sometimes, 28% said not sure, and 11% said yes, all the time.
So Dennis, why don't you lead us through some of the issues that we found on our side with allowing the reps to kind of manage this process?
Okay, thank you, Al. Why do we see the process fail? As Al mentioned earlier, and we saw in the first poll, what we refer to as the frontline people, or people in the clinical area, that's where all the initial action happens. That's where all the information is formed. Think of this exercise, what's the criteria for a warranty? Number one, is it at ERI? Was there a malfunction? What information can the representative supply to back up all this information? And what is the criteria for that device to be returned back to the manufacturer? All that happens right in the cath or EP lab. When the rep is responsible for that, I'm sure these representatives are just like the other clinical workers. They're very busy. There's a heavy time schedule and things get pushed to the side. and fall through the cracks. I'm not going to blame the reps, it's their fault, but the device has to be returned back to the manufacturer for analysis. This is not only true for Medtronic, but also all the other manufacturers as well. So number one, there's information that needs to be supplied. Number two, that device has to be returned in a timely manner. We tell everyone it's 30 days, and we know for Medtronic it's 30 days. I believe Abbott offers 45 days, and that's the date of the explant until the time the manufacturer actually receives the device. So in that process, what fails? Information is not properly handled. It's not sent back in a timely manner. And we can't, or the hospital cannot strictly rely on the manufacturer representative to handle that responsibility. It has to be tracked some way, and there needs to be a process in place. So what should you get from the representative? Being an auditor for over 30 years, you know, I'm a big stickler on information. So the original implant record, all representatives have this. Get a copy of it. Number two is the interrogation report. This isn't an interrogation on the new device, but on the old device. We need to know where the voltage on that old device, what it was transmitting. I'm sure Casey Ann can tell us they're very, very particular about this. It has to be below ERI, or as Medtronic calls it, RRT. So get that information from the manufacturer. Number three is the manufacturers will supply you a box for return, so it can be done immediately. I wanted to point out one thing that Al brought up a moment ago, and that was if you do not return this device and it potentially was due a warranty, those fines and penalties will be or severe. Let's use an example of I won't use Medtronic, let's use Abbott. A failed CRT device, which cost $18,000. It's a Medicare patient. If that device is not returned and a credit would have been issued, the hospital's responsible for this. So the fine is right at $23,000 plus 3 times the credit amount, $54,000. So for that one device, the hospital could be responsible for a $77,000 fine and penalty. Add a few of those together, and I wouldn't want to be the one explaining that to the CFO. But anyway, these are just a few of the things that the rep can do, and we see this. We work closely in our tracking program with the representatives, and we get this information all the time. So I'm going to pass it back to you, Al, and thank you.
You bet. And what we'd like to do now is not let's not hear from Spendman anymore. Let's get Casey Ann, the real star of this show, to introduce herself and take it from here.
Great, thank you, Al. Good afternoon, everyone. As Al said, my name is Casey Ann Posh. I am the manager of the Medtronic warranty team. As my bio says, I've been with Medtronic for 25 years, and in that time, I have run the gamut pretty much from the beginning of the process in clinical all the way to the end of the process here at warranty and post-market quality. So I've been with the warranty team almost 6 years, and in that time, I've really watched the evolution of this regulation come to light at your facilities and really become such an important topic. And I'm really excited to be able to be here and talk to you guys today about how we have, from the very beginning, really aimed at trying to be a support and a strong partner in this compliance regulation. So really quickly, I'm just going to give a little bit of an overview of what our team offers for those of you who aren't aware that we exist. So I won't spend much time here, but it is good to know that we have a team. We're a team of 5 individuals, and then myself. And those folks are really strong. We've got a lot of Medtronic experience backed behind those individuals. They are the ones that are processing your warranty claims. They're taking your calls and your emails. We do process around 11 to 12,000 calls and emails every year from customers and sales reps. And we find that, when we talk about customers, we really are talking about the folks that are here on the line, our compliance folks, our supply chain folks, and our finance folks. We also, some of you on the call probably are aware, we offer some warranty reporting. So we push out a report on the 10th of every month, and that report is a snapshot of your warranty activity over the past month. And that will provide you your warranty status, and it provides, if we issued a warranty credit, it will provide that warranty credit invoice number, the replacement cost, and the credit amount cost. In addition to that, we do also help with auditing. That we've been a partner with SpendMend for several years. Dennis and I have done several audits together. And then even before Dennis and I worked together, he worked with my predecessor very closely. So we have a long-standing history with SpendMend. In addition, if you are not doing a large, massive cross-vendor audit, but you're just looking for a little checkup, you can work with us on that as well. So some of the tools that we offer we have several warranty websites depending on the product. We issue a warranty reference guide every year, and that reference guide does provide access to our warranty documentation. It provides you with an overview of all of the warranty time periods. It provides some good brochures around what our return product analysis lab is doing with your return products, and just some other special things like our supplemental warranties. So we do publish that at the end of every year, and I recommend that everybody be on the lookout for that kind of mid-December. In addition to that, I will have at the end of my slides a slide that has these tools, but we have a product performance website. I know one of the questions that we've been getting a lot in the last couple of years is this product part of a recall? And while our report is unable to provide that specificity, we do have for cardiac products, we do have a product performance website where you can buy serial number, take a look at that, and see if there are any recall notices for that product. I recommend everybody get very familiar with that. It's such a helpful resource. And in addition, it also provides a look into whether or not the product has been returned. So once that's been checked into our lab, that will show up on that website as well. One thing to just caution with that website is that the lab and our warranty team, while we partner together and we are strong advocates of each other, we are not one team, and they do have pieces of their process that they have to go through before we can do pieces of our process. And while we talk a lot, our systems are not necessarily integrated. So our report may say that it's pending product return, and the product performance website may say that it's been returned. Just know, as long as your product performance website says it's returned, eventually your report's going to reflect that as well once we can get to our pieces of that process. So in addition, my resources slide is going to give you a link where you can order return product mailer kits for both cardiac and for neuromodulation pelvic health independently. You could always ask your sales rep to help out with that. But certainly, I know in this day and age where things are, a sales rep is not always present. Sometimes it's helpful to have those resources at your disposal, so you'll have access to that. Any questions? Well, I suppose we're asking questions at the end. Al, I will go ahead and go to my next slide. All right, so I think one of the things that we're probably all really interested is understanding the process, and as Al and Dennis have said, your sales rep should not be your main point of reference for getting this warranty process accomplished. What the field staff can do, and what we always want them to be there to help you and to be a strong partner. They can assist in completing any patient details on a warranty claim form or on the return product information report that comes in the return mailer kit. As we've stated, they can provide you return mailer kits. But what we have stated and what we continue to train to and hold as expectation is that your sales rep is not responsible for taking the return mailer kit once it's been packaged up. They should not be taking it out of the facility, and they should not be dropping it into the mail for their customers. And I think Al has already outlined very clearly and with a lot of emphasis on why that's in your best interest. So I'm very aware that other vendors take a different approach on this. We have chosen to take a stand on this because we do feel like this is providing you the best partner in compliance that is possible. As Alice said, when the OIG comes in to audit, Medtronic is not the one being fined. It's the fines fall on our customers, and so to be a good partner and to be looking out for you as an important customer, we have made the stance that this does need to fall in your hands, so that you have control and authority over what is happening to your return products. So with that said, I won't go through each bullet point. I think you guys know initiating a warranty claim form. I think that's the other big piece that is not always exactly like some of the other vendors. And again, we view this as being a strong piece of that component of putting control in your hands. Is that warranty process is not kicked off until there is a submission of a warranty claim form. And the reason that we do that is because we want you to know that you are submitting for a warranty and that you have the potential of receiving a warranty credit. Because if you receive that warranty credit and you aren't aware that that it's coming, and you don't pass it back on to CMS, Al's outlined what is at stake for you. So we felt like in our process and our desire to be your partner is that if we are allowing devices to be returned and analyzing them and then providing credit on them without there being an awareness that is coming, we don't view that as being a very strong partner to you in your compliance efforts and fiscal accountability. So I think that's really about it for this slide, and I think that pretty much covers it.
Okay, and she has implanting facility here, but know that in this point of the process, we're talking about the explanting facility because it may not be the same thing. And part of what she's saying is just rings true that I've lived on both sides of the stretcher, if you will, is that, this happens in the cath lab, and then all of a sudden, and not all of a sudden, it's usually 30 to 60 days, a credit shows up in AP, and someone there needs to notify that and be aware that that happens. And so part of the challenge here is connecting all of those different departments.
Yeah.
So I'll let you talk about that process then with that caveat.
Yes, thank you, Al. And yes, that implanting facility is really the implanting facility of the replacement. So, we also get questions from time to time about what is the process and what constitutes eligibility. I'll try to make this quick, but we have this broken up into tier 1 and tier 2 eligibility. That tier 1 eligibility is really all of those things that have to take place for us to even look at the product and review the product for whether or not it hit early ERI, or was there a component failure, or was there a fracture or breach in the lead. And really that is the device within the warranty period. Is the replacement a Medtronic product, and is it a comparable product? So, one thing that comes up to note is that if you have a Reveal link or a link 2, and that gets implanted, and let's say it does its job and it finds some sort of issue with the patient, and that patient needs a therapy device such as a CRT or a defibrillator, you can submit a claim, because I know one of the trends is that we all want, I think, every explant to have some documentation trail. But just know that a therapy device is not a comparable replacement to a Link 2, right? So the Link 2 has done its job, and now the patient is getting a new and additional product, a therapy device. So, and then lastly, is that product returned within 30 days? And so again, kind of a whole reason why we're having this conversation is making sure that the sales rep is not taking responsibility for that is going into your hospital's process, and that you guys are getting that returned within 30 days. And once that happens, then we go into analyzing it, reviewing it, and making that final determination about whether or not the product was eligible for a warranty. Quick side note, we get a lot of questions about, well, what about my capped leads? What about my micras that we're not extracting from patients? So no, we don't expect those to come back, but we do expect to have clinical documentation. And we have a slide a little bit later about that, so I won't go into too much detail now, but that clinical documentation does still need to be returned. Okay, clinical documentation. So when can clinical documentation be used in lieu of product returns? Well, we just kind of went over that, and that is really when a lead is capped, or we have a micra that is being left and that is not being extracted. Can I use clinical documentation if a device was accidentally thrown in the trash? No. Devices need to be analyzed and must be returned. So we cannot make a determination about whether a device had a malfunction without having it physically come back. And then what qualifies as acceptable clinical documentation? We have several different forms. That would be the Medtronic programmer interrogation reports with the impedance graphs. Those can be returned. If you use PaySart reports with the impedance graphs can be used. You can also retrieve a device data download that comes in an Excel format that can be used. And this is where I'll note that if your capped lead is connected to a device that is also coming out, and that device is being returned, know that your clinical data that we need will be found on that device. And every one of our devices that come in do have a device data download performed on them. So we're able to get that lead impedance information directly from the device. So it's really, we need that clinical documentation really when you have a capped lead, because the lead is the only thing that went through a revision or some sort of replacement procedure. And then also EGM strips. So I think those sometimes tend to be the hardest to get and get back to us. But if that is all your procedure has wrapped up, and folks have realized they've forgotten to get a programmer report or a PaySart report, and they don't have access to anything else, but you do have EGM strips, you're welcome to send those in. And obviously that all applies for the micra as well.
Perfect. I think we've got our last poll of the day, Joe.
Yep. Last poll. We're just curious how you confirm a credit has been issued. So now that that's launched, we'll give it a little bit for you guys to answer.
I get sometimes asked, can you send me CMS's rules on warranties and when warranties are applied. And those actually come from the manufacturer. There are certain things that void a warranty or would, we just talked about that, not returning it in time. That would void a warranty. Unfortunately, you still may owe CMS. Another thing is if there was an infectious process. Now, if that happens, you don't actually own CMS, and that's why you always see a CNS swab being done and sent back. Sometimes there is inside of those warranty rules. If you did start with one of the earlier devices and you choose a different manufacturer for a therapeutic device, so in other words, you're switching from one to the other, and maybe even a pacemaker to an AICD, that may void the warranty as well. The good thing about it, if that is the situation, then you are free of the CMS expectations versus just not returning it does not exclude you from that. So Joe, as our results in, what are we seeing here?
Yeah, so it looks like the leader was hospitals get credit reports from manufacturers. That was more than half of the voters, while 14% said AP tells us when a credit has been applied. 5% said rep providers let us know, and 27% of voters said they have no idea.
Yeah, well, and I can tell you that was me. When you worried about making sure grandma's okay and getting her out with a new pacemaker, that's where my worry about this ended. And so it was totally reliant on other people downstream to be able to tell us that warranty credit was issued. Thus the importance of having a really integrated process. So one of the great things to help know if there's a credit due, before you, of course, would wait for that credit report to come back. And sometimes those would get issued with other returns in it, and you would get this nice credit memo, and you might not catch that something is a warranty. So Medtronic has created a new tool that Casey Ann's going to go through, where you'll be able to get kind of real-time data. And I'll turn it back to you.
Great, thank you, Al. Yeah, so we are really thrilled to announce, and some may have seen communication from us, but we were able to launch on Medtronic Connect, which Medtronic Connect is a customer portal that's been around for several years now, but the activities that you could do on that portal were more around purchasing, just invoice, and recently they've added returns, so you could initiate a return on unused product through the portal. And we are really excited and thrilled to be their newest offering, which is warranty. So there's now a warranty tile on Medtronic Connect, and you can submit claims from this portal. You can check warranty status from this portal. So no longer do you need to wait for your monthly report to come through. You can go ahead and if you've got a handful of serial numbers that you're interested in, you can type in that search bar right there and pull it up and see if we've been able to make a determination yet. Or if you have you have a whole host of serial numbers, you may want to just do on-demand reporting. So we're able to offer you now the ability to go out and look at reporting for a time frame that you're interested in. So maybe you'd rather look at it for a 3-month time frame versus a month over month, or maybe you want to look at it every 2 weeks. Either way, it's really up to you. And excitingly, through the Connect portal, you can actually download and export that reporting in Excel format. So I know a lot of feedback over the last 5 years has been that we'd like to, folks would like to see this in Excel format. Unfortunately, our pushed reporting will continue to go out in a PDF. That is the program that does that automation for us. Which is 5,000 reports going out on the 10th. That is, we are unable to change that format. But you now have the ability to come in here and get it in Excel if that's what you really want. So we're really excited about this. One of the great things we think about the claim submission piece of this is that if your product is registered and if the replacement is registered, all of those details will populate for you. So these claims, based on the little bit of timing that we've done, we're finding that these are a lot quicker to fill out and submit than the paper copies. So if your facility is, has the ability, I know Dennis and Al's team is definitely taking advantage of this for the hospitals that they support, and I think that's fantastic. And I just find that we're finding a lot of good feedback about the process efficiency this has brought hospitals. So I really appreciate Al and Dennis, you giving us the chance to highlight this. So if you have not already checked it out, I really encourage you to do so.
That's a great tool and invaluable to the customers of Medtronic to just be able to get some of this information that you need to make sure that you are compliant. I think that's about everything that we have, Joe. Why don't we switch over and answer some questions?
Yeah, for sure. So the first question that we got in was, our pathology department keeps the devices for 6 months in case the device is needed for a lawsuit. The manufacturers want it back in 30 days. Can you provide a recommendation?
From Medtronic's standpoint, I would want to let everyone know, and I would encourage you to bring this back to your leadership within your facilities, is that Medtronic holds on to devices for years. So I know that holding on to that for a potential lawsuit or something like that feels secure, but do know that Medtronic does have their devices all in storage, and they are there for upwards of 5 years, potentially more. But devices do not come into our facility, get analyzed, and then get thrown away. They are cataloged and stored for a significant period of time.
That's awesome.
Yeah, interesting. So another question that we got, guys, says, does the patient's desire to take their explant supersede the requirement to send for warranty, to send for warranty claim evaluation?
I can handle that one. And then I'll start it and I'll let you go to this.
Sounds good.
Yeah, often got asked by patients, hey, can I have that? If it's an orthopedic device where you're taking out screws or some kind of fixation device where you're taking out because there is no clinical indication that that device failed, that's fine to give it to the patients. However, if it's one of these either neurostimulators or a cardiac device, those do need to go back and get evaluated. And giving it to the patient, you'll miss that 30-day window and still may owe the warranty back to CMS. So we don't recommend that. I don't know, Casey Ann, if you want to weigh in more.
Yeah, no, I was going to say that potentially you can do both. So if your facility were to add a note to the return mailer kit asking with the patient's name and address, and now this is, I can't promise, but we do strive to always catch that. So what the patient would get back is a sterilized device. It would be engraved with not for human use or display only or something like that, but basically indicating that it should not be used again. And you would also then get your compliance regulations met. So I encourage you to go that route, at least with Medtronic, and potentially, I would say the patient can have their device and you can have your credit too.
And the best part of that is it's cleaned up and sterilized of all the bio debris.
Exactly.
So that in itself is worth sending it back. just to get it cleaned before you take it home.
True.
What other questions do we have, Joe? That's great.
Yeah, thanks for that point, Al. Another question that came in, is there a department that you think should be responsible for the process?
You know, that's a really tough one. And there's layers to it. So, you know, overall, of course, your risk and compliance are the folks that make sure that the hospital meets these minimum standards, whether it's Joint Commission, CLIA, HRSA. There's so many regulatory bodies that come in and have expectations that we're given, you know, a great level of care. So they definitely, in my opinion, should have oversight of this process. And then each department needs to have kind of a champion. At the end of the day, what's interesting is it's really the rev cycle that does the update of the UB04. So they're the ones that execute that overpayment and let CMS know that there's a credit. But if there's not a great way to communicate that this happened, that a credit was received, they'll never know to update it. Dennis, you've been doing this a long time. Do you have any thoughts on one department above all owning it?
Yeah, you kind of stole my thunder there, Al. It's got to be a shared responsibility. Everyone has input to get that device back. As I said previously, it all begins in the clinical department. We understand that their primary focus and responsibility is patient care. However, for the compliance department to be able to do their job, they have to have this initial information. So it has to be shared, but I agree, someone needs to take responsibility for the whole process.
I often refer to this as CMS's orphan standard, because, you know, it's really easy to talk about medication security and different things, physician credentialing, and identify who needs to own it. But this is one of those that no one department intuitively owns this. And the reality is, unless everyone does the right thing across this entire process, including the vendors, right? The manufacturers have to review these, get this back, communicate with you. The process will break. So that's a great question. And I wish there was a simple answer that I could just say, you know, revenue cycle, this is yours. Make sure everyone's doing the right thing. But if you're on the revenue cycle, how do you make the nurses and techs in the cath lab do the right thing, or in the OR to get these back? So it really is a shared responsibility.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Another question that we got, if a physician decided to use a different company's device for replacement, how does the warranty/credit apply?
So I believe, Al and Dennis, let me know if I'm incorrect, but I believe all the vendors have the same stipulation, which is that the replacement product does need to be of that same vendor. So if it's a Medtronic explant, the replacement needs to be Medtronic. If it's Boston Scientific explant, the replacement needs to be Boston Scientific. And so essentially that if you were to, when you get these slides later today, if you were to go back and look at my tier 1 eligibility section, that's that kind of that, I believe it was the middle hexagon. It talks about one of the warranty criteria is the replacement product is Medtronic. If the answer to that question is no, then we make it ineligible replacement product, not Medtronic. And I believe the other vendors do the same thing.
Joe, can I add to that?
Of course.
KC&N is 99% correct.
Okay.
All the vendors have that criteria in their warranty. However, there are some exceptions, and we call these sweetheart deals. See, Boston Scientific occasionally do this if they replace a lead if the original lead was Medtronic and it's replaced with a Boston Scientific lead, they will offer a special discount, or it's a credit, but they refer to it as a discount to get away from the repayment issue We've also seen other companies offer a special deal, and that deal is most of the time below the 50% threshold. So it doesn't have to be repaid. But those are very, very far, but we do occasionally see those.
Yeah, and again, what are we talking about here? We're talking about overpayments.
Yep.
So if there isn't a credit issued, you're not getting a credit back that you have to report back to CMS.
Right.
So if that happens, you just know, like, okay, we're okay. Don't have to worry about that because that you're not going to get a credit back that you have to report.
Perfect. Thanks, guys. While you guys were answering that question, we did get a follow-up question on the one regarding department that should be responsible for this. Someone said, should one person be in charge of keeping track of the process instead of one department?
I am definitely a big fan. One of my mantras when I was in the OR is consistency and procedure is going to lead to predictability of results. It also applies to your golf swing. You should have a champion in each department. There should be someone that kind of is like, if we're talking in the clinical department, they're the ones that have been identified to be responsible that, oh, we have a switch out, it's on the schedule unless it's an urgent case that comes up from the ER. But these are typically scheduled cases, they're coming in. You need to identify the person that's going to be, hey, let me get the interrogation report that gets run that morning on the device. Let me get that manufacturer's implant record, get it in a box and be responsible. I think if everybody's responsible and then no one does it. Kind of the same thing on the returning it. Someone should be identified that they're the ones that are going to return it. And you have to have backup plans and redundancy, of course, in case someone is off that day or goes on leave or something happens that they're not there. But the more that you can identify a key player that has ultimate responsibility, they can always delegate. AP department, I think it's a little different because everybody gets credits, and you may be some hospitals that I've worked at, they are do AP by certain clients. So they may have Medtronic and Abbott. So that's a little differently. And then on the patient billing side, the rev cycle, that typically is the government payment responsibility. They're different than the folks that do the private payers. So someone should be targeted there. That's a good question. Unfortunately, I'm not sure I answered it great, but know that yes, having one person responsible is going to lead you to be able to do this consistently.
All right, thanks, Al. Another question that we got, this is a good one. Where does SpendMend come into the equation for this process as a management solution?
So basically, this is Dennis and his team where we come back. So we have software. So that software allows us to connect all the different departments. So what I love as a clinician, I don't have to be the expert on whether or not I return this device. Anytime there's an explant due to failure, battery depletion, something goes wrong, it's recalled, and I put in a new device, I'm able to just enter it in there. And that's where Dennis and his team come in. They review every one of these devices and determine whether or not it should be sent back. Then once that determination is made, they generate inside of the program a return label that you put on one of those boxes so that we can make sure when it gets sent back and when it gets to that manufacturer. The next step in the process, when it gets back to the manufacturer, is where Dennis and KCN work together. We get those feeds from the organization, from the manufacturers, to know whether or not that credit was issued. And then through the software program, we let both AP know and patient billing that this is a device that was issued a credit. The software will identify that it's above 50% or not and be able to help you with it. So we provide the software that tracks it so that you have that consistency, that policy and procedure across all of the different departments. And then we have Dennis and his team's expertise, because this is one of those processes where if you give people software, it doesn't mean they're going to do it correctly. You need the expertise of Dennis and his team to be able to look into that. And sometimes we even will go back to Medtronic and say, hey, when we look at this, you said credit is denied. When we look at the supporting documentation and whatnot, we believe there is a credit due. And so they'll re-review that. So we kind of, hold the clinicians responsible to make sure that they put every one of these devices in it. One of Dennis's favorite catches is that a device never gets entered into our system and suddenly a credit is issued. And so Dennis goes, okay, this went outside the system. Good, you got the device back. Bad, you didn't document it like you should. But we got a credit back, so let's go back and get all of that documentation. So we're really a Monday morning quarterback. Dennis, anything you'd like to add to that process?
Yeah, I think you covered it great there, Al. But Joe, when you get close to the end of the questions, I think we should initiate Casey Ann with a question from me. So just whenever you're through with your questions.
You're on.
Yeah, go ahead, Dennis.
Okay, good. Hey,
apologize.
Casey, I've been working with Casey Ann since she began in the warranty department, and I can honestly say 98% of that has been professional and cordial. So no, it's been fun. But going back, I was listening to you intensely, especially when you were talking about this lead documentation and this data download. I questioned this several years ago about a device, but I'm sure it works the same for a lead. This download, the representative can provide a copy of that Excel report. Is that what you said?
So I would say that is the probably the most difficult one for a rep to provide you. I would say that would need to be a process piece that's discussed and agreed upon and decided up front, because that's not something that is part of their normal process in a procedure. So it is a piece of data that is accessible and that can be retrieved. It's most easily used when the device comes back to Medtronic, and our return product analysis lab can retrieve that device data download. So
well, I'm talking about a lead now. So
yeah,
the lead's not returned.
If the device with the lead was also.
I got you. I follow you.
Yeah.
And the other follow-up to that is, how long is that information stored? Do you know? Is it archived for 6 months or 3 months or?
Well, any device data download that gets pulled as part of the return of the device goes into our quality system. So I am not aware of the archiving timeframe in our quality database. It certainly isn't, a year or two. It's extensive cataloging of devices. So, we have done, I think, Dennis, you are well aware of this, but we've done audits with SpendMend and other consultants where, we're looking at devices from 2011. And, if there's a device data download in the quality system, we're still able to pull it. So, so it's that information, we have a very robust and very thorough document storage solution at Medtronic, and houses a lot of really great data.
Would that information ever be available on Connect?
Not at this point in time. I can take it as a potential enhancement, but it is the quality database that the FDA would go look at. So I know it's fairly protected and not a lot of things that get to be connected to it.
All right, well, you passed the initiation. So.
Perfect. So I just want to thank everyone for joining. We're at our time here. Appreciate you listening. If you have follow-up questions, let us know. We'll continue to answer those and put them in on LinkedIn. As Joe said, he'll be sending this out to all of you that are registered. We really appreciate it, and we're here to help. So if you have questions, let us do that. Thank you, Casey Ann, so much for being part of this. You've been a joy to work with, and we just appreciate it. Bye, everybody.
Thank you so
Thank you,
much.
Casey.
Everyone.
Have a good day, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.